I see many faces that belong to our club and many wonderful new faces. We appreciate your coming. That's one of the things that we found with our Zoom meetings is that we've been able to reach a lot more people in many different locations, not only our speakers, but those listeners. So we so appreciate you taking the time to come, and I hope that you will enjoy it. And maybe come back to other programs. I'll talk about it afterwards. I won't keep you away from this great program now. So back to Debbie.
So hello, everybody. I'm Debbie Moran, and along with Gail Martin, I'm one of the co-programmers for the Houston Tuesday Musical Club. And today we have a really exciting program, I think. I got the idea for this program when I was asked to participate as a violinist in a 50th anniversary Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album concert at Miller Theater. And one of the songs we were playing is George Harrison's Within You, Without You, which is based on Indian music and involves 4 Indian instruments. So we had one of our rehearsals at the home of our guest, David Courtney, and his wife, Chandra. And on the outside, it looks like just any average Westbury home. And then you walk inside, all of a sudden you're on the other side of the world. So we had the sense of Indian tea. Chandra was wearing her sari. The living room wall was covered with Indian instruments. And I found out that they are sort of premier Indian instrument and music experts here in Houston with an amazing biography. So first of all, for professions, they write and teach about Indian music and perform. David Courtney first started out with the tabla in 1972, and both he and his wife have studied with some of the best Indian performers in India. And over the years, he's written many books. He's considered an academic in Indian music, also an authority. They've recorded for television and movies. And I'm going to let him tell a little bit more if there's anything I've left out they'd like to mention. In 2009, they were designated cultural jewels of India. And without further ado, we have a lot to do today. We're also going to have Isabelle Ganz later relating Sephardic music to some of the same traditions that Indian music has. And then we'll have Olive Chen at the end of the program for a little bit of variety playing Bach on cello. So I'm going to go ahead and invite David to unmute. And the format of this is he's going to present a little bit, and then he'd like to field questions. And at those points in the program, I'm going to allow you guys to unmute. So let's see if we've got David out there.
We're going to do this program in 2 parts. One is we're going to introduce you to the basic instrumental style of North Indian music, where we'll be discussing the music. And then afterwards, we'll start a small little survey of Indian instruments. Well, to begin with, Indian music, whether it be vocal or instrumental, begins with the drone. Can everyone hear a drone in the background? Very good. Now this drone is provided by an instrument called a tanpura. There comes in a number of sizes, from very small ones like this. I don't know if you can see, but it's probably about 3 feet in length, maybe a little less than 3 feet in length. This is normally used for accompanying instruments. We have a larger one, which is generally used to accompany vocalists. This one is about 4.5 feet in length. It has only 4 strings. See from the 4 knobs here, 4 strings, and it has a bridge. This particular one is wood, but it's usually made of camel bone. And all one does is simply pluck the 4 strings. Okay. Now for today, we have the drone recorded. So that will be going on continuously in the background. The reason we have the drone is because Indian music by its very nature is modal. And with any type of modal music, you have to have some sort of trick or cue or something to let you know where the tonic is, because it will not necessarily be reflected in the overall structure of the scale. Let's start looking at something about the scales. Now, North Indian music, just like Western music, has this theoretical base what would be similar to the Western natural scale. Everyone hears that okay? Okay.
Yes, we can hear it.
Very good. Now, the difference is it has different names. Rather than do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, it is sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, and sa. So this is also considered the natural scale in North Indian music. But as such, it has no more nor any less significance than any other scale. It's just a theoretical starting point. For instance, if we take the fourth and make it an augmented fourth, we get a basic tritone, or the devil's interval. So if we use this scale in India would be known as Kalyan. Now, in Western music, this shows up in a number of places. Probably most known to most people is the Simpsons theme song or the Jetsons theme song. In the West, we tend to refer to this as the Lydian mode. But this scale in Indian music is known as Kalyan Tat. Now, Tat is only a scale. In order to derive a rag from the scale, we have to get certain characteristics. Like, for instance, in Rag Yaman, we omit the first, the sa, in our ascending, but we allow it in the descending. So the ascending structure of Kalyan would be. Notice we also omitted the pa in the ascending. But all the notes are permitted in the descending structure. Now, in the beginning of any classical performance, it starts with a style known as alap. Alap is just a free improvisation upon the rag. It's not bound by any rhythm. So this was alap. Now, we only did it a couple of minutes, but it is not unusual for alap even to sometimes go for an hour or more in a performance. Afterwards, we began to introduce a rhythmic element, but one which is not bound by a rhythmic structure. This is called jor. This is chord. Now it has rhythm, but it has no rhythmic, it's not bound by any rhythmic structure. Now the rhythms in Indian music are known as taal. In most instrumental music is based upon something known as teen taal, which is 4 bars of 4 beats each. And in terms of timekeeping, it's structured 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, after the chord, a typical performance will move into something known as a Vilambit gut, also known as a Mazikani gut, which is in slow teen taal, slow 16 beats. So this would be, and then there would be some elaborations on this and improvisations, and this could easily go for half an hour, whatnot. Afterwards, it moves into a fast gut. May or may not be in the same tone, usually the same tone. Here's everybody's fast gut. After that, it would move into a style known as jhala, which is a purely instrumental style, which is based upon the melodic note rapidly interspersed with the drone. Now, the only other thing that I would like to mention about the rhythm is that in the case of most North Indian classical music, The tabla is the timekeeper. So in order to make it work, there is a convention of strokes on the tabla that lets her know where she is at every time. And these are described by a system known as boa, where the strokes of the tabla have different names, such as na, ga, ha, hin, titta, titigita, titigita, and so this, by these mnemonics, by the syllables that are in my mind as well as her mind, she knows where she is at every time. Now this is pretty much discussing the instrumental styles of music. Now before I move on to the instruments, let me open up to questions.
Are those instruments played in ensembles or orchestras, or always individual music?
It depends upon the style. In the classical music, what you hear now would be usually all you would find, just sitar, tabla, and a drum. However, in the less classical styles where it can be composed, you can have large orchestras. Most of the classical music is like jazz in that it is heavily improvised. And with any improvisational music, there are limits to how many people you can throw together before it turns into a big mess. So pretty much think in terms of a typical classical Indian performance as being comparable to jazz, in that it's usually suitable to a very limited number of instruments. So that's a good question.
Thank you.
Now let me address this question, and let me start with the sitar itself. Now the number of strings that one finds on Indian instruments can vary. Even with sitars itself, there are different numbers of strings. But one thing that one has to look at is that there's not a standard number of strings, there's not a standard gauge of the strings, there's not even a standard tuning of the strings. These are all part of the artistic process. It's similar to the situation with open tunings in Western instruments. Now, if you look, there are certain philosophies of strings. Like in this case, let me move the camera forward. So, as far as the philosophy of the strings, and most Indian instruments will follow the same philosophy. Let's know something about the structure. Notice that the sitar is based upon a gourd. It's a large gourd, but rather than hide the fact that it's made off a gourd, it's accentuated by this leaf motif. It has a long neck with frets that are made of metal, but they're tied on with string. So they are movable. You see the string? You can move the frets up or down, which we frequently do because for reasons that are never quite clear to me. If you look here, the minor seventh and the minor second are missing. So if you need those, you will take these frets and move them down. Now, I was talking about the philosophy of the strings. In the sitar, the first string and the second string, but primarily the first string, is almost the only one that's actually played. This is known as a baj tar. The other strings here are drone strings. But there's a third approach to strings. Underneath you have sympathetic strings, like you find in Baroque instruments. Now, the sympathetic strings basically function as like a reverberator, but one that does not require electricity or processors or springs or anything like that. So you've got three philosophies of the strings: a playing string, a drone string, and you have a sympathetic string. Now notice also the bridge. Notice that there are two bridges. The first bridge has strings that go over the frets. Obviously, going over a fret would be a prerequisite for being able to play it for the baj strings, either the first string or the second string. You have another set of strings in the lower bridge. These strings go under the frets and obviously could never ever be fretted. The bridge here is made of camel bone, which is a very common material for building many things in India. Camel bone is similar to ivory, but it's much more easily available, and it's actually much stronger and harder than camel bone. So this is basically the sitar. Okay, at this point, let's just go and open it up. Any questions about the sitar? Unmute everybody and let's see if anyone has a question about the sitar.
Well, you mentioned all those strings, so you have to tune them all. How many is that to tune?
Oh, in this case,
7 is main, 11 is simple.
in this case 20, but 18 to 21 is a normal number. As I said, if you get several sitars, they may have different numbers of strings, but the philosophies of the strings will be the same. Good question. Any other questions on the sitar? Okay, then let me move on to the next instrument.
Which one?
We were talking about the drone. The drone also in the north are usually made of a gourd, usually with a similar decorative leaf motif. The tanpura only has 4 strings. The main pegs are up at the top, but there are also these beads down here at the bottom that function as like they function as sort of a fine tuning. If you move the beads up or down, it provides a fine adjustment for the pitch. Now, the way this is normally tuned is the 5th, the octave, and then the bass. Okay, now this is a ubiquitous sound for any Indian classical performance. But one of the things that's interesting is the bridge. Notice that the bridge has a certain contour in this direction as well as this direction. In this direction, it's fairly obvious. It only makes it easier to access the strings for the same reason that a violin bridge is a contour in this direction. But what's less evident, less obvious, is the contour in this direction. Now, what happens if you have these strings? You see this string right here? If it's set right in the right position, it will buzz. Let me show you what I mean. If I have it in the wrong position, this is a sound, but as I move the string into the correct position, now look carefully. You feel that buzz come about. If I keep going, then the sound disappears. So there's a sweet zone here, where if you have this thread just in the right position, it'll introduce a rattling. The same principle as a guitar that has a warped neck, but whereas that's a random, undesirable rattle, this is a very carefully controlled rattling of the strings. So this is one of the things that gives the tanpura its distinctive tone. Okay, now tanpuras can go in any sizes from, as I said, the large to the small. Before I move to the next instrument, any questions?
This size.
Yeah, see the big difference? Okay. All right, so any questions on the tanpura?
Those strings, are they just tied around, or they're not? And what are they made of?
They can vary depending upon one's own requirements. In this case, I have in this case, which is fairly normal, the first 3 strings are steel, and then the last one is bronze or brass. But they can be strung at with almost any material according to what kind of sound you want and what kind of pitch you want. Brass and bronze are lower pitch, steel is a higher pitch. Now remember, there's no standard. Everyone sings from a different position, and everyone has their own preference. So the tuning is part of the entire artistic process.
No, I guess I meant the strings at the bridge that were Are they tied around?
No, it just goes over the bridge. They're
Part
attached.
of it's
They're
part of,
attached to the base plate on one side, and then on the base plate on one side and the pegs on the other side. It's not attached to the bridge.
the strings for the buzzing that you were just
Let me see.
adjusting. They're part of this.
Let me show you. Okay. Give me the chortle. That might be easier. Okay. So you can probably see this easier. You see the strings attached at a base plate here. The strings pass through the beads, over the bridge, down the neck, go over an upper bridge here, through a string guide, and then attach to the pegs at the top. So the only attachment is at the base plate here, and then again up at the top is a peg. Does that answer the question?
I guess I meant the little loose end strings that you were moving get the buzz effect. That's what I meant.
It's just thread. It's just thread. It's just held in place by. It's just held in place by the being between the bridge and the string.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's stuck in between. It's stuck in between the bridge and the string. Good question. Any other questions? Now, taos is a Persian word which just means peacock, because you see that this has a form of a peacock. Okay, see the peacock here, and see the legs, and see the tail. So this is called a taos. It's a bowed instrument. In terms of the stringing, it has the same philosophy as the sitar. We have a playing string, you have drone strings, and you have sympathetic strings underneath. That's the same. But one of the things which is different is, if you notice here, the bridge is on some taut goat skin. So it's sort of a banjo-ish type construction. It's played with a bow. It has a typical bridge which is fairly similar to most bowed instruments. And this is the taos. It's not very rare, very rare, but this was fairly common in northwest India about 500 years ago. Let me see. Let's see the bow. As I said, it is not in tune. It's not in tune, but that's it. This is the taos. Any questions about the? No. Before I go into other instruments, there are instruments that are related to this. There is the dilruba and esraj. This is the dilruba, and it might be considered to be just a diminutive form of the taos. I'm sorry, this is esraj. Esraj, which is like a diminutive form of the taos. And dilruba, which is very similar. It could be thought of as just a regional variation of the two. So looking at these three, we have the taos, which is the peacock form. We have the esraj, which is like a diminutive form of the taos, and the dilruba, which is very similar. They're all played with bows. They all have stringing, which is somewhat comparable in philosophy to the sitar. Any questions about these instruments before I move on? No questions? Okay. Now, let's just generally make a quick survey. Okay, well, that's it. I'll just quickly say we have like a hammered dulcimer here. We have various types of other bowed instruments, and that's pretty much it. We've got some other things, but that's all the time. Any questions?
Yes, if you have any additional questions for David and Chandra, you are allowed to unmute at this point.
Do the stringed instruments play together at times, like will there be more than one sitar? Or of the other stringed instruments that he just showed us that will
Yeah,
play in a group?
sometimes, yes. So the answer, yeah. I guess maybe one more question.
How do they tune then?
Oh, well, they tune together. They have to get together and come up with something which is mutually convenient.
Okay.
Obviously,
Can I be heard? Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Are there brass or woodwind instruments used?
The woodwinds, yes, a very common one would be we have flutes. This would be a whistle equivalent, a fiddle flute. We have this is like a double reeded oboe. This is a Shanghai. This is Basri. We have transverse flutes. But yes, we do have woodwinds. A typical Basri would be like this would be a typical Indian flute made of bamboo. Yeah, it's a transverse flute. Typical, very common. Yeah. Any other questions?
Which part of India is hammer dulcimer is played?
Northern India. Yeah, this is the santur right here. The santur is mainly associated with Persia, but there is the Indian santur, which has a little different form factor. This is the Indian santur.
And I have a question. Is the music completely improvisational?
It depends upon the style. The classical music is a mixture of improvisation and fixed theme, such as very typical example would be like, jazz is a mixture between a fixed theme and improvisation. But not all North Indian music is classical music. So yes, you can have music which is based upon fixed compositions.
Okay.
Anyhow, I don't want to take too much time. I've already taken enough time, and I want to turn this over to Isabelle. Unless there's any more questions that you feel you really need to answer.
Yeah, thanks so much, David and Chandra. That was wonderful. Very, very clearly presented. We learned a lot in a short time. Did want to mention, are you guys still able to teach these instruments during the pandemic?
Yes. Chandra teaches harmonium, which basically the harmonium is very common in India, even though it's disappeared in the West. And she teaches vocal, and I teach tabla on Skype.
And there's just one other thing, because I know this will help with Isabel's thing also. Could you just show us what one of the wind instruments or things that you blow through? I don't know what they're called. Just what it sounds like, or?
I'm afraid my skill is not particularly very good, so I'm not even going to attempt to.
Okay.
But the Basri basically sounds like a flute. All flutes may have a subtle difference in tone, but not to the extreme difference like you find in the stringed instruments in India.
Okay.
There is the.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. When you were playing, did you decide before you started how long you were going to play? Who was the dominant leader? Was she the one with the strings? Is she the one who led that? And then what about the drum? It's your own interpretation?
The drone is almost always the first and the fifth.
It's what? Repeat, please.
The first and the fifth, the tonic.
Okay.
Because since the music is modal in nature, you need some hint to let you know what the tonic is. So the drone is almost always the first and fifth. If the fifth is not present, then it falls back upon the first and a fourth. Now, in the rare cases where you have neither a natural fourth nor the fifth, then it may go to first and some other note.
And I see in the chat, she was also asking about the drum, the tabla, as far as which one of you has control of between you and say the sitar, who would have control of the music?
So what's going on? She would start a composition that would tell me what the tal is and what the tempo is.
That's it. That's
I
it.
get in on that tempo and on that tal accordingly. Once I'm locked into place, I become like a metronome, and then she can improvise and things like that. If she wants to change it, she will come back into the fixed theme, and according to whatever musical cues she gives me, she can give me cues to either go faster or to go even into a completely different tal. So she controls the overall flow of everything. But once I'm set into place, I act basically like just a timekeeper. That's how the responsibilities go.
So once again, thanks so much for being here. If you have the time to stay with us, I understand now, since I've worked with Isabelle a little bit, why she wanted to present after you. Some of the instruments she's going to present are sort of parallels to some of the Indian instruments.
As you were talking, I was making some notes on the similarities. There are many, namely, in both Indian and Sephardic music, the melody and the rhythm are usually very complex, and there is an absence of harmony, which is a total difference from Western music. We have drones also, and heterophony, where different instruments are playing the same melody at the same time, but with few changes for each of them. A lot of improvisation. In Sephardic music, we call it a taksim, where you are like jazz going off, but always within the mode. And I'm going to talk about modes and makams later. What is Sephardic music? A lot of people have no idea. Sepharad was mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Obadiah, and it refers to the Iberian Peninsula, what is now Spain and Portugal. And actually that Sepharad was a province in the Roman Empire. So in Spain, you have the three cultures, the Christian, the Jewish, and the Arabic, living side by side, what they called convivencia, living together, which sometimes was friendly, sometimes ended up in murders. But let's go for the music. The Arabic, or we shall call it Moorish, had a great influence on the Jewish music. So the Sephardic song is really a mixture of Spanish romances, which was the Christian element, the Moorish song, and later, after the expulsion, other lands of the diaspora. So what was the expulsion? 1492, we all learned that as kids. What happened? Besides Columbus, there was the Edict of Expulsion. So King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella said, anybody who is not Catholic is going to have three choices. You can leave the country, you can convert to Catholicism, or those are the three choices. So most of the Moors went to North Africa, and many, many in the Jewish community also went to North Africa. And you got a branch of Sephardic song there in a language called Haketia, which is a mixture of Spanish, French, and Arabic. And then the majority of the Jewish community went to Turkey, also Greece, also the lands of the Levant. But for the most part, Turkey, because the Turkish Sultan said, oh, these are very talented, educated people. Let's take them in and see what they can do for us. So after 1492, the Spanish became frozen in its 15th century state and didn't develop. Linguists are fascinated by the language of Ladino, we call it, because it's Old Spanish and people are still speaking it. It was always a mixture of Spanish and Hebrew and a little Aramaic as well. So I'm going to show you in the first video you will see is a song called Las Tres Clavinas del Amorado, the three flowers of the beloved. So there's, I'll just translate briefly. Three flowers in a basket, one white, the other pink, the the center one red, the beginning of love. Now, the word in Ladino is empezillo del amor, the beginning of love. In Spanish, it is empezar. So you hear that anybody who speaks Spanish can understand Ladino until they get to the Turkish words and the Hebrew words. Elsewhere in there, it says, flecha d'oro voy echar ande calle es mi mazal. I'll launch my golden arrow, wherever it falls will be my luck. Mazal is Hebrew. So you have this mixture of Old Spanish, Hebrew, and in this particular song, you have a chorus in Turkish. Aman minush minush, oh minush minush, yarum minush minush, sheker minush minush, which her name is Minush. It says, sweet, my beloved Minush, sweet Minush, and that repeats for every chorus. So this is my ensemble Alhambra, rehearsing in my apartment in New York, which I no longer have because it got too expensive. But it was 3 years ago. And we made this video in order to raise money to GoFundMe and to make a fourth CD, which we did, and Debbie is going to later show you that CD. So here is the video of this song, Las Tres Clavinas del Amorado. People ask me how I got into Sephardic music since I am not Sephardic Jew. I am an Ashkenazi Jew, and the Ashkenazi Jews had their ancestors in Eastern Europe, whereas the Sephardim had their ancestors in Spain. Interesting story. It happened in the 70s. You all know about the Texas Renaissance Festival. Well, it came, I was teaching at the University of St. Thomas, and a man from the Texas Renaissance Festival told me what they were starting, and he said, do you have a group of students who can play early music at the festival? And I said they weren't really up to professional standards, but I could put a group together. So I asked Wolfgang Justin, who was teaching German and who played guitar, if he could bring his theorbo. Theorbo is like a long lute. And Steve Bates, who played recorders, and Steve Estes, who played cello. And we went to the Texas Renaissance Festival, and I started researching, what are we going to do? And I found 12th to 16th century Spanish court music. And then I saw this Sephardic stuff with these complex rhythms and complex scales. And I said, oh my God, this is really interesting stuff. Then I heard Victoria de Los Angeles, who is one of the pioneers in the field of Sephardic music. And I started researching it and fell in love with this stuff. So in 1981, we made a record, an LP, you remember LPs, and the group was called the Broken Consort. So in early music, a consort of viols is one, you have all string instruments. A consort of winds, you have all wind instruments. Broken consort means you have mixed winds and strings and percussion. So that's how it started. And then we were invited to spend the summer in Graz, Austria at the American Institute of Musical Studies, AIMS they called it. And they introduced us to a viola da gamba player from Ohio, he was, named Wayne Moss. And Wayne then moved to Houston, and we had the Broken Consort here. After that, I moved to New York and decided I was really going to pursue this, and asked one of the most famous oud players in the world, George Mergadichan, if he would like to form a group. I was really scared because he was really, really famous. So I dialed the phone, remember dials, and I had sent him this recording of this Judeo-Spanish romanceros. And I said, would you be interested in forming a group? He said, yeah. I said, you would? And so George came, and we had a trio then, and it grew over the ages. The people in the group, as you see from the video now, they're really quite young, and the problem is when you have rehearsals, you don't understand their jokes, but it's a different generation. Now, what about the instruments? You saw the oud there. The oud is the ancestor of the lute. Al-oud in Arabic, it means the wood. And that instrument, which is really from the 3rd century Persia, traveled west. When it got to England, that al-oud, the L from the word the, got transferred to the noun, and it became lute, al-oud, lute. You can hear that. And the microtones that you can play on the oud did not please the British sensibility, so they put frets on it. So it became a lute, which you all know about, but it looks similar. This is an oud, very, very highly decorated, pot belly, and the neck very similar to a lute. I can't play it, but actually nobody can play it because there are no strings on it. I think that Debbie has some photos of other instruments that I don't have here. There is the oud with its pot belly. And there is the most ancient of all instruments, which is similar to what David was showing you, the wooden flute. In the Arabic, it's called a nai. And here is the kanun, which you're going to hear on recording in a minute. This is an immensely complex instrument because the right hand has finger picks and is plucking the string. The left hand is flipping levers, and those levers change the pitch to as small as an eighth tone. And it's really hard for Western ears to hear these microtonal changes that Arabic musicians can hear very, very clearly. I'm just going to demonstrate a quarter tone. This is the sham that I was playing in the video that you saw. It is really a Hirtenschalmei, which sounds German, and it is, which is, Hirt is a shepherd and Schalmei is a sham, and it was used to call sheep. The reason I use it is because it sounds very much like a Turkish zurna, which is used in this music. It has a capped reed inside, but the zurna has the double reed outside, which means you have to spend your life practicing, which I'm not willing to do. So back to quarter tones. I'm going to play a D major scale with 5 notes of it. D, E, F sharp, G, A. Here is minor. D, E, F, G, A. Here is a quarter tone, half sharp F. I'm sure you can hear that, yeah? Then there are all of the makams, or makamat, which are Arabic Turkish scales. For example, I don't have a keyboard here, so I'll demonstrate it on the flute. What you heard there, actually the Three Flowers of the Beloved, Las Tres Clavinas, and also what you're going to hear in a minute, are in the makam called Husseini. I'm sorry, this is Hijaz makam, Hijaz. So it starts with an augmented second, and it goes often into Hijaz Kar, which is which gives you 2 augmented seconds, raising the 7th step. There are many, 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 many makams. Arabic musicians are experts in this. I'm still learning it. Yes, back to the wonderful kanun that we can't play. If Debbie would put on a recording, this is a song called La Rosa Linda, which we recorded in our 3rd CD, and you can hear at the beginning the sound of the kanun, which I'd love you to hear.
Tráeme agua.
Just as Debbie stopped it, you were about to hear a taksim, which is the improvisation. Um, the rhythm is pretty standard 4/4, but as I said, it can get infinitely more complicated, like a samai, which has 10 beats to a measure and accents on 6 and 7. The translation of this, by the way, the tenor was the Ramon Casat, and I was singing with him. The beautiful rose came out of the sea. Ah, Sarika, my lovely one, bring me water. He said, I can't bring you water. My stockings came off and I'll catch a cold. Take off your wooden shoes. God is great. He will help me and I'll buy shoes for you. And she says, I don't need you to buy shoes for me. Papa is a great merchant and he'll buy shoes for you. So the text of these songs I love enormously. Using Sephardic song, I've been immersed in Sephardic song since 1978 or so. That was the Renaissance Festival, and then we started Alhambra in 1981. So we were one of the first groups to really concentrate on it. Now there are hundreds of groups. But I've been so immersed in it that the Apollo chamber players asked me if I would write something to balance their holiday program December 2018, 2 years ago. And they wanted something for Hanukkah because everything was Christmas Carol based. And so I took several Sephardic songs and arranged them for a string quartet. And then they said, would you do a sing-along? And so I took the most famous Hanukkah sing-along that there is called Ocho Candelicas, which was written by Flori Jagoda, whom we just lost 1 week ago. She was 97 years old, and she is a singer. She was a Holocaust survivor and a singer and composer and preserver of her tradition from Bosnia. She was born in Sarajevo, and she married a GI and moved to Virginia and was there ever since. She wrote many, many, many songs, but her most famous is Ocho Candelicas, which is 8 little candles. And the audience sings una candelica, dos candelicas, tres. So here is a Sephardic Hanukkah, which we performed again this past December. Yes, I wrote this 2 years ago for the wonderful Apollo chamber players, and composers love to have second performances. It's based on 5 Sephardic songs. 4 of them are folk songs, and the last one was written by the Sarajevo-born composer-singer Flori Jagoda. And it is a sing-along. And I've asked, since, during these impossible times we're living in, there is no audience. So I've asked the quartet to sing and play simultaneously, and you at home to join on the chorus. This is in the language of Ladino. And the language of Ladino is the language of the Spanish Jews. And it was always a mixture of Spanish and Hebrew. But after the expulsion in 1492, it took on words from the entire diaspora. So added to Spanish and Hebrew were words in Turkish, Arabic, French, and other languages. But the verses, which I will sing in Ladino, say, beautiful Hanukkah is here, and I am going to give many parties with great pleasure, and I'm going to eat pastries made of almonds and honey. Now, here comes your part. The song is called Ocho Candelicas, 8 little candles. So your part goes, una candelica, dos candelicas, tres candelicas, etc., until you get to ocho. Now, be careful if you're a Spanish speaker because there's no cinco, it's cinco candelicas, seis candelicas. Those are the 2 changes from Spanish. Right before ocho, there is a rest, so that you don't sing on the rest. Bang the table, ocho candelas para mí, or you can bang on your knee, or hit your partner, whatever. Just don't sing on the downbeat. Here is a Sephardic Chanukah. So now if you have any questions about Sephardic music, about classical compositions based on Sephardic music, anything, unmute and ask away.
Yes, I've allowed everyone to unmute. One thing I'd like to mention, while you just did some Sephardic music on Western instruments, is while I was researching this, I found actually out from the New York Times that there's also a young Indian composer, a woman, who's now translating Indian music onto Western instruments. And her name is Reena, R-E-E-N-A, Esmail, E-S-M-A-I-L. And she's making the rounds of all the symphony orchestras, there's piano trios, violin music. So it's nice to see some of these Eastern traditions translated to Western musicians so they can play it. And if we have any questions for Isabelle? And if not, we have Olive Chen, who would play, we have sort of dessert today of Bach on cello, one of the prelude to the suite number 5. And I want to thank so much Isabelle and David and Chandra for today's presentations.
Where can we hear this music being performed?
Deborah, would you like to show that CD?
Right, let me find the...
All you have to do is contact me, and I have thousands of CDs that we have made.
Okay.
This is the latest one. You can go to Spotify and find it. The others, you'd have to go call me.
Okay. Thank you.
An enormous amount of material on these CDs, and there are many, many, many ensembles. You know, just Google anything and you will find them.
Brava, brava. That was absolutely beautiful. Came out beautifully across Zoom. What I'd like to do in the interest of time is invite Roy to end the meeting, and then I'll let it run for a little bit and allow people to unmute themselves in case you want to speak or congratulate the performers or the speakers or have any more questions. So thanks so much, all of it. Really worked beautifully over Zoom. And I'm going to ask Roy to unmute himself. And I think he's here and ready to end the meeting.
Yes, thank you so much, Debbie and Gail, for planning this great program. I sort of feel like we had a trip around the world today with all this fascinating music and different instruments. David and Chandra, thank you so much for letting us into your home. And Isabelle is just fascinating as usual. And
I'd love to say one thing.
it's okay. We're lucky to have Isabelle as a member of our club. She's just a wonderful addition for us.
Thank you, Roy. I want to shout out to Debbie because she helped me so much with all the tech stuff. I am technologically challenged and she is so patient. So thank you, Debbie, for everything that you did.
Yeah, she's a wonderful explainer of things and helper. So she's helped many of us get through this time. So yes, thank you. And Olive ended with a great piece by Bach and a great performance. Thank you. That sort of leads us into our next program, which is on February 23rd, where we will be celebrating the 336th birthday of Handel. So we hope you can come then and celebrate with us at that time. Thanks again to everyone who came. We'd love to have you on our mailing list. If you type your email address in the chat, we'll be able to get that. Or you can go online to our website, find out more about the club and our other programs. I think we have maybe 4 more this year. Very informative programs just like today, and amazing musicians, and a wonderful time. We're so glad you're here and would hope you will come back. And now I'll turn it back to Debbie.